Good morning. I've heard two perspectives this morning. One perspective of, can you believe it's the last Sunday in January already? The other perspective, it's still January. Some of us, or many of us, have had kind of a rough week this week. It's been a week where there's been words or actions that have been spoken or implemented that are causing people to feel oppressed, less than, unworthy, not wanted, marginalized. So what I'm here for you to do today is to speak to you the truth of who you are, the truth of your being. Human beings are innately good because they are connected to and an expression of spirit. I find it no coincidence that this is what I'm preaching on this week. I've known I was preaching on this week for at least a month. And divine order knows just when it needs to be planted. And I think that is so amazing. Today we're going to explore our goodness, and we're going to explore our expression, our divine expression. So I love acronyms. They're fun. And this is amazing because when you look at the second principle, it's all about you. The second principle is all about you. And when we look at it in the sense of that we are that divine expression, it is Yahweh, oneness, understood. And I chose, Yahweh not only because it starts with a Y, but because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. But the Yahweh aspect of God is that and when we do that, when we really pay attention to our breath, we can really connect with that divine aspect of us that connects us to that oneness. And then we understand that we are the light of the world. So why? Why this second principle? Why do we do this? What's the point, right? And for me, it's like we need to know, but then we also need to know within our heart space. Because in order for us to transform the world, we must connect with this truth that anchors us. This is where our power is, y'all. This is where amazing things happen. And some things are amazing, extravagant, like somebody who runs into a burning building, no thought to anything, saves a person and brings them out. And there's the simple things of just being who we are. When we unconsciously, just because we're being our divine self, we act with actions of goodness, with kindness, with love, with compassion, with mercy. Bishop Miriam Edgar Buddy shared with us, and this was February of 2023 on a blog that she wrote. As a person of faith, I dare to trust that God is at work amid the most challenging realities of our lives, and that, by grace and acceptance, we join God in the holy work of transforming the world. That's what we're here for. Come back to that later. The other reason is the good that we are, when we express in our divine selves, becomes the good that we see. Makes perfectly good sense. Not to overuse the word good, but it applies. When we fully act in divine expression, the good that we are becomes the good that we see. And this is indeed unboxing God. Last week we talked about taking God out of the box. That full expression of the energy of all that is, that all that we are, that is everywhere present. There is not a spot that God is not. Period. It creates a magnetic pull of transformation. Like things attract to other like things. It's scientific. So when we put more good out there, more good attracts to us, more good gets spread everywhere else, because here's the kicker. There may be people who may not be fully aware of their full goodness for whatever reason, and may choose more often than not to make not so great choices. But your goodness, the goodness that is the divine goodness, never ever goes away. So if the good is there, and you have a magnetic pull over here, no matter how small this feels, what do you think it's going to do? Eventually. So it's important for us in our divine work to hold that sacredness, to hold that goodness for every single person on this planet. Period. Everybody. We are God's work. We are that. And so I got to think, like, how do we get to that point where we do that? We be that more often than not. And one is to trust your divinity and stay humble and balanced. Because I said last week, when you fully lie into principle number 2 and you see that second face of God where God is within us, but you only live in that, then that might make this get a little bit too big. So trust your divinity and stay humble and balanced. It's important. Stay prayed up. And if you're at a point where you're like, because I've been there, like I can't even pray. But there's answers for that. There's help for that. There is a number that you can call for that, 24/7, 365. Silent unity. If you need prayer and you can't do it for yourself, call them. Call them. Affirm the truth that you know to be true. We are innately good. Say that. I am innately good. I am innately good. We have access to unlimited source and divine ideas. This amazing God source that we are part of, that we have, this wonderful web of energy that moves and connects us all together. When we surrender and allow ourselves to be open, then the answers come to us. Sometimes we don't even express that we have the need. And most importantly, we are strong. Strong meaning that yes, you can be this, but more like you endure, you persevere. That with God, with me, as me, through me, there's nothing I can't get through. And I got to looking for where I saw people expressing as God's work. And I came across some stories. I'll share several of them, but they're short. Don't worry. But they're perfect. I live on the opposite end of the country from my family. And on the way to work one day, I found that there had been a horrendous house fire at our family home. 6 fire engines were needed to get it under control, and it gutted most of the house. I was at a train station sobbing on the phone with my husband because I didn't know what to do, and I had just come so close to losing my entire family. A random teenager came up to me with a chocolate bar and a pack of tissues and pressed them into my hands and just walked off. I was so touched by that kind stranger. When I was 10, I was in a fairly horrible car accident. My very pregnant cousin was driving. My mom was in the front passenger seat, and I was in the back seat of the van. A car ran a red light and T-boned my mom's side of the car, and we spun around and rolled and smashed into the median so hard that we crushed the cement curbside. Luckily, we were all okay, including the baby. But I was in shock when we got out of the car. I was shaking, and a homeless person came over to me, gave me their hand warmers. It was December, and they likely needed those more than I did that day. When I was in kindergarten, and my sister was a baby, we moved to a new neighborhood. Shortly after moving, my mom became very sick, and my poor dad was struggling to balance work. Taking care of us and tending to her, he was really stressed too because Christmas was coming up. One of our neighbors stopped him one day, and he confessed that he was having a hard time. On Christmas Eve, this neighbor and his wife brought over piles of presents for my sister and me, despite not celebrating Christmas themselves and barely knowing us at all. I don't know this story until years later, since my dad just said the gifts back then were from Santa. And 20 years later, my parents are still very close with our neighbors. I'm very forgetful. After a rough day at work, I went to the mall. I was about to pay for something, and I realized that I didn't have my wallet with me. I knew that I had it in my hands when I got out of the car in the parking lot, and I rushed back out to my car, and I found a napkin in the door handle. It was a note saying that I had left my wallet on top of my car, and they'd put it on the front tire. Nothing was missing, and it made my day. I wish I had a way to say thanks. My family and I were on vacation, and we had just gotten into our car and headed back to the hotel, and suddenly a car sped across the road and T-boned another car. And that went flying into our parked car. My brother and I were kids, like 10 and 4. We were really scared. Our car was parked in front of a club, and people inside must have heard the commotion because suddenly a bunch of drag queens came running out. They opened our car doors and helped me and my brother and my parents out of the car. See, to some people, these are acts of kindness. But when you settle in to your you, your Yahweh oneness understood, this is what showing mercy, being kind, and the practice that Jesus taught us. It is the practice of our faith. It is godly. It is holy. And you are that. It is what we call living out our principles. When we get to principle number 5, I'll talk more about that, but it is really being that divine expression in the world. And so, don't let nobody dim your light, honey. Don't let nobody dim your light. Shine on, y'all.